Welcome back. The Defense Information Systems Agency says it's hitting a breakthrough in identity, credential, and access management for the Defense Department. The department lists ICAM as one of the major pillars of its zero trust effort. Brian Hermann is Director and Program Executive Officer at DISA's PEO Cyber. Brian, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. Why is ICAM such an integral part of the zero trust effort that not just DoD is undertaking all across government?
Well, I think it's clear that ICAM is the foundational capability that enables zero trust. You have to understand who a user is and verify that positively before you can decide whether they should have authorization to access a system. And so together, public key encryption and identity credentialing and access management form that foundation.
I read DISA is developing a federation point that will simplify the user experience. In this description of this breakthrough that I referenced, federation is a term that I see on a number of occasions. Why is that term important to the work that you're doing?
So in the context of what we're talking about right now, the federation of ICAM solutions across the Department of Defense means that a user can access a system based on the same authentication point that they're typically using for their own home service applications, but then be granted access through a trust relationship among those ICAM service providers. And so that is the new piece of federation. Sometimes people talk about federation in the context of synchronizing identity data. We provide that function and have for a long time, but the ability to have a streamlined user experience and to make sure that we understand across the department everybody's access is the new part of what federation does for us.
And that streamlined user experience is where I wanted to go next. I'm curious what you're doing to make this as transparent as possible to the end user who doesn't need to know about these changes.
What we really didn't want to have was we didn't want to have a situation where a user had to know which ICAM service that they had to go to access some critical information or a critical application. Instead, we wanted to make sure that they could go to the same place for that purpose. So an Army user can go to an Army ICAM solution and then be granted access to something that is either a Navy system or somewhere else in the Department of Defense without having to wonder where they should be going. And that's enabled right now. We've completed the federation efforts with the Army as our first service, and now we're moving through with the rest of the services.
What was special about the Army that caused you to want to start with them, or that they asked you to start with them? How did that process work?
Honestly, it was willingness and the maturity of their system. So they were willing to understand that first attempt to federate would likely, produce some challenges, and that it did. But we worked through those fairly quickly. Largely, these are not technical problems; it's procedural problems that we worked through, and we expect to see faster pace as we go to the other services because of the experience that we had with the Army as well.
That was where I wanted to go next. What did you learn from that implementation process that you could apply with the other services?
We essentially established a process that we will go through and some guidelines for each of the services to understand what to expect when we go through. The most interesting questions that we kept getting as we started to talk about federation was, well, what does it look like technically and how would we go about doing that? And so now we can give them some solid answers. We had thoughts on what that might look like, but the implementation of federation and the process of bringing the Army in ended up being fairly straightforward, and we think it'll be even better as we go forward. And we were able to leverage common tools from industry versus trying to create something special for the Department of Defense. And since each of the solutions that are being implemented across the department leverage similar common tools, not necessarily the same common tools, we're actually able to feel real confident technically that the federation will work out well.
Is success measured in this area as a user tries to use it and it works, so it works, or is it more complicated than that for you to measure that you're on the right track?
I think there's probably a little bit more than just, so from a user's perspective, they're normally thinking about their day-to-day access. So the authentication point for their system is the key place where they think of ICAM. But there's some other pieces behind ICAM that they haven't probably thought about. And we had a paper-based process in the Department of Defense called a DD Form 2875 that provided all the approvals for somebody to be granted access to a system or to data. And that is an antiquated way of doing things. And so part of ICAM is the automated account provisioning process, which takes the identity information that we have, we establish some metrics and attributes about a user, and then we go through an automated process to allow them access to a system. And then that's all logged, so we know everything Brian has access to within the Department of Defense, and we can take action if something looks anomalous there as well. So we streamline the process of authorizing users, and then we have security around the process of authenticating those users.
It sounds like that's the broader connection to the digital experience for each user, rather than just, I mentioned ICAM is an important pillar of zero trust, but it sounds like you're thinking about the entire digital experience for the user.
Absolutely, and by the way, I don't limit that to DoD users. We have systems across the Department of Defense that have a need to work with other federal agencies. We have systems, and one that comes to mind is in U.S. Transportation Command. They have to think about logistics and transportation of shipments for the department around the world. And that means that they have partners, mission partners in industry that will never have a common access card. And so we have to find a way to make sure that they can have access for that use case. And so it's really challenging, and I think ICAM eventually is also going to be the key part of how we establish a level of trust between the U.S. and our allies and coalition partners going forward as well.
What has to happen in order for that vision to be fulfilled, do you think?
So some of that is in place in some policy. I think those policies need to be updated to not just reflect our closest allies, but they also have to reflect the fact that we're working sometimes with changing and shifting coalitions and allied partners. And so establishing a way to set the standard of expectations under which we will allow the trust. We have to have a certain level of maturity of the capabilities on the part of our mission partners. And then we have to have probably the ability to be agile, perhaps in cutting off that trust if that's no longer warranted going forward. We
have about a minute left. Do you have a sense of a timeline yet for when you will be integrating, as you mentioned, with the other services beyond the Army?
So we will be completing the Navy and the Air Force this fiscal year, and move on as all of the other ICAM solutions become available across the department. I think probably the other key piece of what we're trying to accomplish is not just delivering capabilities for ICAM, but we're also having to establish that those ICAM solutions need to be adopted by application owners and data owners. And so they need to hit the targets by the end of FY26. All the financial applications in the department have to have adopted ICAM and automated account provisioning so that we can achieve a clean audit for the Department of Defense, and that's an important milestone for us as well.
It's great to have you on the program, Brian. Thanks for your information today.
Thank you.